Hi, my name is Kenzie and welcome to a watercolor tutorial, and today we're going to be painting this landscape. So my recommendation for this painting is, if you aren't familiar with painting pine trees, definitely get a scratch piece of paper, practice doing the trees first, and then you can dive into your main piece. This is probably the trickiest part of the painting, but it's definitely a lot of fun, and since there's so many trees, hopefully practice makes perfect. Let's dive right into it.
Here, my size 8, 4, and 12 brush. I like these sizes and I use them the most. I also have this oval mop brush. I really like to cover large areas with this brush. I also have 2 cups, one for cool colors, one for warm colors. I have right here my Winsor Newton palette, and I like to color mix on this tray from Amazon. And I just like to use painter tapes from Dollarama for the size. I feel like it doesn't rip my paper and it comes off really well, and it does a really good job at not letting the paint bleed through. I also like to use Dr. Phil Martin's Bleed Proof White. This is really good at just sitting on top and giving me a really bright and pigmented white, so I use this quite often. I have a dryer hair. This really helps speed up the process between my layers, so I definitely recommend having this.
All right, so with my fresh water, I'm gonna come in and start mixing up my landscape color. So I want this to be very moody, so I'm gonna use more of an indigo blue for my mountain. I'm gonna mix in just a hint of sap green as well into my mountain. So we're gonna start with our mountain first, and you'll see some dots here. This is just a basic guideline of where we want our mountain to be roughly. So I'm gonna start with a darker color towards my top, kind of following around where my dotted lines are. And then using just the water that I have on my sheet, I'm just gonna drag and pull this water down. And you'll see I'm moving pretty quickly because I do not want this to dry. So just dragging what I have all the way down till it fades off to almost nothing. Okay, cool. I also want my tops to just be a hair darker, so I'm gonna go in while it's wet and just make it a little bit more moodier towards the top area. Again, just using some water now to kind of just drag this out. Okay, cool. I'm pretty happy with this. Softening out any harsh lines I see. Okay, so I'm gonna dry this now, and I'm gonna move on to my next mountain. So we're using the wet on dry technique. I'm painting with a wet surface, which would be this blue, on a dry surface, which is my paper. So I had to let this right here dry 100% before I'm able to move on to my other mountain. Otherwise, these two mountains will just bleed and expand over top each other and not be able to kind of layer and sit on top. So I'm gonna come in now on the other side, and I used a little bit more of a pigmented blue. And I'm just gonna come in over top again. Now I'm gonna come in just using water to drag out and down this little mountain area to nothing. Okay, cool. So do you see how with just water I'm able to get this kind of misty, soft look? I love this so far, so I'm gonna dry this. I'm really happy with this layer, and so I'm able to move on. I'm gonna dry it, okay? Okay, so onto the sky. Again, your 2 mountains need to be dry before you head on to this step right here. So I want this to be a very moody vibe. So I'm gonna go into my sunset with the exact same mindset as before. So I'm gonna mix my indigo color, but I'm gonna add some black to it. Actually, I'm gonna add a lot of black to it. And I'm just gonna put it here in my palette. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the wet on wet technique, and I'm going to apply water to my background right here. And I'm not gonna go down and touch my line. I'm gonna stay right above it, kind of mimicking what that would look like. So I actually want right there to be very soft and misty and almost white. So I'm gonna come in now and apply my first layer of darkness. Just like that. So this is a little too soft for me. So I'm gonna come in, especially towards the top, and I'm gonna apply a little bit more black. I'm gonna get rid of all of the water on my brush, and now I'm gonna come in with a reddish color, and I'm gonna come right underneath it. And I feel like, again, this is just a little bit too pigmented for me, so I'm just gonna blend it out with just water that I have on my brush, blending it ever so slightly into my black, just a mixing of the two. And I'm gonna mix a little bit of orange now. And I want it to become softer as we get closer to my mountain area, like a softer orange. There we go. Again, I'm not touching my mountain, I'm kind of stopping around it. Just adding a little bit more of a more pigmented red. I didn't love the other one. I'm gonna add a little bit more indigo to my black and add a little bit more of a bluish tone to my sky over here. Okay, I'm gonna leave it like this, and I am going to start down here, and if I want to, I can go back in and add more layers to my top. So we're gonna come and work on the bottom, and I'm gonna switch over now to my size 12 brush, and I'm gonna mix in a really nice army green color. I have a little bit of red already in my mixing palette, and I'm gonna mix in a bit of sap green. And sticking with this moody vibe I got going, I'm gonna mix some indigo to it as well. I'm gonna put a lot of water so we have more of like a wash. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of ignore these lines for now, but you'll see little dots. Anything below the dots is going to stay white, okay? So I'm gonna come in here now and just do really soft, using the wet on dry technique, really soft lines. I'm adding a little bit of black. I'm not loving this color. And this is very pigmented, so I'm just gonna break it down with some water. I don't want it to be that, yeah, I want it to be soft. Just doing some really nice lines, kind of mimicking what trees would look like in the distance, bringing it into this little bluish area that I have going on. The key here is lots of water. That'll really help make this super light and airy. I'm even introducing different shades of green into this while it's still wet. Coming around with just water. I'm just using the very tip of my brush, just doing little squiggly lines coming all the way down. Coming on this side, doing some lines. So these ones I'm going to try to just make them appear a lot smaller than the other ones. Now the key here is to also be making sure that you're leaving white space as well. White space is just leaving the paper to kind of shine through. That's how you add a lot of depth with watercolor, is by letting the paper shine through. I'm going to come over here now. See how this was like one section over here with the dots? So now we're gonna come over here on this section and just do a few of these little lines to act as trees that are in the distance, coming over here and this little block right here and doing some lines. Now this is very much loose watercolor. It can feel very awkward if this is your first time. Coming in with a little bit of some darker greens to give it just a little bit of pop. If it's too pigmented, add some water and it will really just wash it out. I'm even going to come down towards my ink marks and kind of drag a little bit of this green color, just a hair. And I'm actually going to bring this down towards this line right here. Okay, cool. So these are going to be the trees that kind of just appear in the distance. Sorry, I'm going to add a little bit more. Okay, cool. So if you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these lines, these are going to be our main focal points, our main trees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a darker green. So I'm mixing up my sap green, and I'm going to be mixing up a lot of this color. I'm mixing in my indigo color. I'm also going to mix in a hair of black to get that really nice pine look. I'm just touching to make sure everything is dry. Okay, so now we're going to kind of do some really loose, almost dots and blots. So kind of following along the line of the tree, you're going to start to just blot and make little shapes as though it looks like little pine trees. So you'll see I'm using very small motions. I'm using the very tip of my brush. And as I get towards the bottom, I'm gonna start to pull out some of these lines and make them larger. So very skinny at the top. And as we get towards the bottom, we're gonna start opening it up and making them appear larger. So again, I'm doing really loose lines coming away, following the shape of what a pine would look like, a pine tree. Now, as I get towards the bottom, I'm going to start to just use a little bit more water to start to give the appearance of like a really misty looking tree. And they also get a bit thicker at the bottom too. So now I'm just using some water to kind of scoop up and move around. Perfect. So I'm going to leave this tree and I'm going to come over here and do pretty much the exact same thing that I just did with the other side. I'm just mixing up again a really dark, nice green color. Actually, I'm going to come over here so I don't smudge it. So doing my very large tree, just coming around. So continuing this all the way down, getting bigger. And I'm just touching in a little bit more like green to this and coming in, making it larger and thicker. So I'm getting near the bottom. I'm also going to grab another brush, my smaller brush, and I'm just going to kind of lift up some of it so it kind of, again, gives up a more misty vibe. And as I'm working my way towards the bottom now, I'm going to come in with just water on my brush, and I'm going to start to kind of just apply water, smudging out the bottom, and I'm going to start to kind of bring it down just a hair where you see these little dots right here. I'm going to let that one dry, and then I'm going to come down here again, creating my little lines. My little flicks. Try to make it thicker towards the base of my tree. And again, blurring it out towards the bottom where my little dots are right here. I'm going to touch in different shades now in this green while it's still wet. Okay, I'm gonna let that one dry. I'm gonna mix up more green, adding a little bit more black to it, a little bit of indigo, a little bit of purple. There we go, that's a nice color. Okay, so this one's dry, so I can now again come in here and do this part. So this can feel really awkward doing little motions like this. So if you're just feeling a little like you're just not loving it, practice on another sheet of paper until you feel like you're getting the movements that you like. So as I'm coming in towards this tree, I'm also being mindful in trying to kind of go around. Okay, towards the bottom, I'm gonna come again and kind of blur it out. And where my dots are, I'm just adding a little bit more darkness and just kind of smooshing it out a bit to kind of hide my little lines that I've done for you guys. Coming in, adding a little bit of blur at the bottom. Okay, so I have a couple more lines. I also want to do just a little tree over here, just in the distance. So if you're ready to try to freehand it, you can definitely do so. So I'm adding a little bit more water to this one than the other ones, just because I want it to kind of appear in the distance. I don't want it to stand out too much. Okay, I'm ready to come in and do this one now. And again, blurring it out just a bit at the bottom. All right, we got one more tree, guys. So I'm coming in here. I want it to be darker. Tapping in that darker color. And smudging it out. And I'm also gonna do, I think, just a few little trees with more water. And just kind of create the illusion that there's some in the background. I think I'm gonna do another one over here too. Okay, so now that we're done with our first layers, if you see any type of lines and stuff and you want to add a little bit more depth to your trees, you can totally go in now at this point and you can tap around. Now, the key here with layering is to make sure you're not completely covering the layer that you already have originally. So you'll see when I'm going in and I'm blotting around, I am not completely covering my original color. Just touching around different spots, and that's how I create my layer. You can still see my original one. So I'm gonna come in here, mixing up a little bit more of a darker green, especially for this one. And I'm just gonna go in and just touch different spots. Just need a little bit of a shadow. And it just makes your tree just pop just a little bit more. And trying to be mindful to not go too different than the color that you have down. But you want there to be just a little contrast. Okay, cool. So now that I have my little shadow shades down, I can dry this. And again, if there's any other spots as well that you just want to add maybe just a third layer, totally do that now. There's just certain spots where I can see my ink marks. So I'm just going in to try to cover them up, especially down low. Okay, cool. So I'm feeling really happy about this. Now I want it to kind of look like a nice snowy day. So I'm gonna come in. Oh, you know what? Before I add my snow, I want to just add a little bit more depth to the bottom part over here. So I'm going where my ink mark is right here. I applied my first color with the wet on dry, and just like we did with our mountains, I'm dragging it out with just water on my brush, giving it a really soft blend out. Around here as well. So I'm going around that line that I had, using just water, touching the edge to just drag it out and make it look like there is some soft mist going on around here. Touching different spots. Now the white space down here is supposed to kind of represent snow. Okay, so I have my Bleed Proof White by Dr. Phil Martens. So now I can go in and I can touch different parts of my tree, and it will give a nice illusion that there is some snow in your trees. This Dr. Phil Martin is awesome because it just sits on top and it's very pigmented and very strong white. So it doesn't matter really how dark I go, it will just sit on top of my color. So using a very similar technique, I'm just blotting around my tree at different spots to give the illusion that the snow is just sitting on top of my tree. So to also give this kind of a cool effect, you can load up your brush with some water, get a good amount of your bleed proof white, and then you can kind of just flick your brush and it will give the illusion that there is some snow happening. I want to get some on the mountains just a bit. I'm gonna kind of load it up really, really good. Just like that. So this is giving off November, first kind of frost vibes, and I love how this turned out. If you painted this, send me a photo.